So B2B marketing has historically leaned toward rational messaging, but we're seeing a shift toward more emotional consumer style creative. How do you approach building B2B campaigns that feel human, culturally relevant, and brand driven, importantly?
Yeah. So we have a few beliefs in our brand strategy at Mastercard overall before I get into the B2B part of it.
Please.
Every decision is an emotional decision. We believe quite a bit in emotions, in multisensory, in neuroscience, etc. And so I agree 100% that there is an opportunity for B2B messaging marketing overall to be more emotional. And I'll give some examples. When we're having a conversation with a client, and I used to be a salesperson prior to this role, we're always trying to spark someone into action, either by making them anxious that there's perhaps a risk that they're blind to, or an opportunity that they're potentially missing. Either way, we have the opportunity to propel their job. And obviously, there's nothing more personal than that. Who better than Mastercard to bring this type of marketing into the B2B sphere? Now, we also believe more so in showing rather than telling. And so there are examples that we often employ or use and talk about. One is if a sponsorship of ours does fan voting. In the past, we've secured that voting to make sure that it's a fan that's voting and not a bot, right? So that has a really humanistic message, very Mastercard type message, right? However, it is promoting Mastercard security features. That's one. Two, a much heavier example from the invasion of Ukraine. We used our data to create, in part, an app called Where to Settle. There was such a migration of people from Ukraine into Poland that they needed places to find places to live, jobs, etc. And I believe the number is as high as 20% of those that came into Poland used this app to find new jobs. And by the way, it had a positive economic impact on Poland. So what a great message to help enable, obviously from a humanitarian standpoint, what a great message to be able to impact. So that brings in the purposefulness, et cetera, all wrapped in the strength of Mastercard data, which of course is a B2B construct.
Absolutely. And I absolutely love that. I think I've heard increasingly over the years, brands being able to be a platform for good, kind of using everything at their expense to really make a difference in a way that is not immediately transactional. I think that's extraordinarily powerful, especially in this 2025.
This is a key value of Mastercard's. We say doing well by doing good.
Love
the
that.
more good we do in the world, the better we will perform. And that can take the form of inclusion, things like the touch card where the sight impaired can decipher a credit, debit, and prepaid card. The inclusion of more small businesses into the economy. We know they're the lifeblood of economy. And by the way, it plays out in our four walls. We have a saying, you put your hand at people's back, not in their faces.
Oh, I love that. I really love that. Not blowing smoke, Mastercard's one of my favorite brands. And one of the reasons is because the innovation is nonstop there and it's just extremely inspiring. But with rapid innovation and increased noise in the B2B space, how does Mastercard stay differentiated? We're all chasing sometimes the same shiny objects and things, but how do you stay differentiated and how do you translate that into effective, measurable marketing? That's so important when you're chasing the next thing.
I'm going to take that from a business standpoint before a marketing standpoint. From a business standpoint, we are somewhat in a category of one. I know most people would compare us to Visa as our closest competitor, and for sure they are, but only 60% of our revenue is from the payments business. 40% of our revenue is from services. We've made over 25 acquisitions in the last 10 years, and we have capabilities like loyalty solutions, cybersecurity solutions, personalization solutions, identity solutions, open banking solutions, et cetera. So that's from the business standpoint, really prideful to work for a company that's innovating so much on the business side. As marketing strategy follows business strategy, And then there's the brand as well, meaning the brand in its case has a personality of its own. How do we keep the momentum moving forward? I understand that to be your question. The answer in the broadest sense is that creativity is the last strategic advantage. Technology and data are enablers for that, and we leverage them.
Yes.
Right? Quite often you want to ask yourself, what's the problem? But you also want to ask that we want to solve innovatively. But you also want to ask yourself, what's the technology and how do we use it? And I'll give an example. A handful of years ago or more, my boss, Raja, came into my office and he said, how are we using AI in B2B marketing? Now, this is before any of the chat GPTs, Copilot, Gemini, etc. And I was scratching my head. He's got a way of doing that. He sort of just leaves you flat-footed and a little bit stunned. But a few weeks later, a colleague walks into my office and he goes, I think I have an idea on how we can automate RFP responses. And we actually developed something called the RFP Factory that uses AI to read, ingest, and respond to RFPs in hours rather than days. So this is an example of creativity, right?
Right.
Other examples, we stay on top of cultural trends, we stay on top of technology trends, etc. And, just last week, I believe we announced a solution called Agent Pay, which is, hey, we're looking at AI.
Right.
It's been in our four walls for decades. It's what helps you stay safe from fraud.
Absolutely.
What's different now is that it's been democratized into all these GPTs, et cetera. So now, every man and woman can unleash themselves. And you start to get ideas like Agent Pay, right? Which is, well, wait a minute, if we've reduced the friction of payment, maybe we can reduce the friction of the transaction more holistically.
That's super, super cool. And I love the RFP Factory. I love when people find solid use cases for AI, like exactly that. Like you're leaning into its strength. That's just a great example.
I'm a believer in the AI being an actor on the team, and I'm borrowing that phrase from Gartner, I believe, and viewing it as a team member. What are our processes? How can we augment our processes? Now, I do think we're, as a discipline, not just at Mastercard, as a B2B or maybe marketing discipline across companies, we have found more uses for AI in efficiency rather than effectiveness. I think the effectiveness ones are coming. I think, obviously a fully automated customer journey through the buying cycle, would be a way to have that happen. And some of that is happening in light touch, in an automated way anyway. But I think that, we're going to wake up one day and someone's going to announce a massive idea in terms of B2B marketing. And we hope and trust it's us.
I love that. And I couldn't agree with you more about today. It is about efficiency. It is about streamlining. It is about taking the work that your best and brightest don't need to be spending their time on so that they can elevate what they're doing for the brand. I think it's just it's, in my opinion, the right approach in 2025, looking at AI.
I'll give an and to that because I know it's on people's minds. I get asked all the time, and perhaps you do as well, as to whether this will replace jobs. I can't say that it won't replace jobs, but I can say that at Mastercard, we run a really tight ship from a cost standpoint. And if AI can take some of that pressure off to give people the higher order thinking time and the time to be more creative, then all the better.
That's nirvana. So one of the reasons that I'm so excited to have you here today is that I'd like to dive into a conversation that it seems like the marketing industry has been having, I don't know, since I got into this business. And it's always, everything's in silos. We got to break silos. We got to be working together. Everybody's got their things. And it's almost like, we're all on the same team. Why are we having skirmishes against each other? And last year, you were part of a brilliant case study in kind of rallying these disparate groups to kind of one North Star. And for our listeners, what I'm talking about is in 2024, MasterCard underwent an organizational restructure. A change at this scale naturally tests leadership. So how do you keep teams focused and inspired during times of transformation while ensuring the collective vision stays clear and energizing. You want your teams to know, like, you're the team, I got your back, but you're also part of a larger thing. How do you balance that?
Okay, so there's a lot in that question. So let me take a running start at it and correct me redirect me if you need to. The first is, look, any such change can be disruptive to people's lives in a very personal way, right? Mastercard has been on a constant retransformation. I got to Mastercard in 2006. We were 3,000 employees. We are now 36,000 employees.
Sheesh.
So we have been growing tremendously, right?
I would say so.
And by the way, that kind of growth can be disruptive as well, but it speaks to our ability to constantly change, to evolve for the next growth curve. And I believe that's what we've done here. So let me talk about the business side of that first, which is, look, it gives us a real opportunity to be more buying group focused. Organizing ourselves by capabilities. We talked at our investor day about how, payments throws off a lot of data. That data then enables our services that I mentioned earlier, that then gives us the opportunity to not only monetize, but become more competitive to win more payments.
Right.
Right?
Virtuous circle.
And so this restructuring helped unlock some of that potential. And this is where I'll speak about my organization in particular, because for sure it's had its silos. We've, as a result of acquisitions, have, brought team members on. And by the way, in some cases, these team members are bringing skills and creativity and experience that we previously didn't have in the discipline, right? And so our B2B marketing strategy has been transforming over time. I mean, the team was 4 people when I started it. It's now many more than that. And it has sub-disciplines even, which, is a state of play that I'm quite proud of. But it requires those that are there continuously learning and then, bringing in new talent. And so here's my example. Historically, we have sold things we are known for to customers we have done business with, cards to banks and merchants. And where we participate B2B marketing in that funnel is further down in the funnel. Enable the sales force, help them with RFPs, give them demos. Now we are also, in addition to that, selling things we are not known for to customers that we may not have done business with, either different customers themselves or different buying centers within existing overall customers. And that's a different, again, as marketing strategy follows business strategy, there's a different marketing strategy that must be employed closer to the top of the funnel, where we are working together with sales to target different buying groups to drive their attitudes and their behaviors. And a lot of the companies that we have acquired bring that level of expertise. And so this restructuring has enabled it in a way for us to come closer to being one community of people that learn from each other across business units and regions. And it has uncovered some of the operational synergies that we are capable of. For example, rationalizing the tech stack. We don't need 8 of something. One of something works. In fact, one of something works better because it unlocks a single view of the customer.
Thank you. Took the words out of my mouth. Yeah, that single source of truth. My goodness, my data is look at it. That's absolutely a mess. But so let's
if I could just double on that, because you'd think the world thinks like us, and we say, of course, single source of truth, be customer focused, right? Mike's a single person. We should treat him like a single person.
Thank you, Greg.
However, that's the pulling of the string. The pushing of the string happens when you can convince finance that you can save some money, right?
Yes,
so
absolutely.
deduping saves money. Okay, great. Please proceed. Oh, by the way, it also gives us a single source of truth.
And that's a beautiful lesson for everybody out there. Like, if you're bringing what's going to be great for you to other people, they're going to be like, sure. You have to figure out what's going to be great for them at the same time.
Well,
and let's
you have to market
together.
Internally, so to speak.
Oh, my goodness,
empathy plays a big role.
Yes.
Externally and internally.
Absolutely. Yeah. Come on. We're all, listen, the most generous person on earth is driven by self-interest. You know, you need a little bit of something in there to get you excited for it. So love that. And I love the idea of a brand as expansive as Mastercard being like, nope, we're picking one stack. We're streamlining this.
Well, that should make sense, right? We're picking one brand too.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
We very deliberately have
Well
decided
said.
not
Very
to
well
be
said.
a house of brands, but rather a
Right.
branded house, right? And I'll just click on that for a second.
Mhm.
You know, look, having been at Mastercard for so long, and maybe I would have observed this even externally, you know, we've honed a great set of attributes on payments.
Mhm.
It's about globality. It's about acceptance. Most of all, it's about trust.
Yes.
By the way, what's more important than trust in today's environment? It feels
Don't
like
think anything.
anytime you say trust is important, it only seems to become more important.
Right.
And authenticity as part of that trust sort of breaks down into a few different components. And now we're able to take those attributes honed on payments and bring it to adjacent categories to compete in.
Yeah.
Right. And that's really cool. My analogy there is big fan of Dove products.
Yes.
Most
same.
people maybe now are getting to the population is young enough where they might not remember that Dove started as a bar soap or a beauty bar with a drop of moisture. That drop of moisture
Yup.
is akin to the attributes that I'm saying. So attribute of moisture honed on beauty bar and now expanded to be, you know, a multi-billion-dollar brand across beauty.
Yeah.
So that would be my analogy.
I think it's a really apt one. So one of my favorite things about this restructure is that it wasn't a fire drill. We weren't doing it because we were in a downturn. We weren't doing it because something needs to change. I think far too often brands will wait until it's too late to address and to start looking at things. So what advice would you give for individuals arguing for foundational changes or even tweaks when things are going well for the business?
Yeah. I mean, look, it's a great insight on your part, and thank you for raising it, because this truly was done out of strength and unlocking the next bit of potential energy. I think the advice, to answer your question directly, is be paranoid. So we, going back many years at Mastercard, we always, you know, would look at Kodak and be like, how do we make sure that, you know, what happened to Kodak doesn't happen to us by Apple, Google, et cetera. And there was a really salient moment. You know, happened to be in investor relations in the early 10s, and we would get a lot of such questions. And if you notice, what we did is we decided to have a partnership model. Instead of building walls and digging a moat around Mastercard, we decided the best way at this is to partner. We bring certain things to the table. Our fintech, bank, and other partners, neobanks, bring other things to the table, and together we're better, right? So in fact, coming back to the B2B marketing, we often use a line that is, together the possibilities are priceless, which of course is borrowing from the heritage of the brand that was built among consumers to even make the brand more robust. And so out of that fear of being disintermediated by PayPal, by Amazon, by Apple, et cetera, this was the strategy that we adopted. It's been successful to date. When Google Pay and Apple Pay launched on the phones, and it's actually our tokenization that powers it, the investors and people at large realized more of what we meant. So now fast forward, right? We're making sure that we are maintaining our competitiveness. And, you know, if you read the risk sessions of our 10K, it hasn't changed. We still have big risks like most companies do. But we're diversified, we're innovative, and, you know, we're willing to change to stay ahead of that disruption.
Yeah, 1,000,000%. And it speaks to the confidence of the brand and the organization to really know that there is no ceiling. We can do better than even this, when you're really, you know, the envy of a lot of other brands, to be
so look, I would, as you say that, it makes me think of the leadership of our company. And, you know, as I mentioned, I've been at Mastercard for 19 years. And I think one of the things, if not the primary thing that's kept me there, is at all levels, there are people I want to be like. And if you hang out with those people, it tends to rub off, right?
Absolutely.
Or you hope it does anyway. And, you know, over time, there's only grown that number of people. So I'm really humbled by the people, the talent we get to work with, the level of leadership, the level of creativity. And I'm going to reinforce, that's not just Michael and Raja, my direct reporting line. That's broadly across the organization, including, people at lower levels of the organization who just bring absolute huge amounts of energy and creativity every day.
We are talking modern B2B marketing. We're talking breaking down those silos. We're talking getting everybody less about the name on the back of the jersey and more on the logo in the front.
Oh, I love that.
So, that is not mine. I am a thief many times over,
Very good.
but appreciate it. So what do you believe, in your opinion, is the single most effective thing business leaders can do to help eliminate silos at their organization and improve cross-departmental communication? Once we go on that, what about those throughout the organization that don't just kind of get to hand down a mandate or bring all attention to the center? What are your thoughts on that?
All right. Well, the first one is always easy to say and maybe hard to do. Look, we are a matrixed organization. By definition, I think at matrixed organizations, you've got to drop your ego and you've got to have collaborative conversations. Now, I've been given feedback, and I know that it's true that I am on the far end of collaboration. If you want to be the hero, I'm happy to let you be the hero. I care about getting it done for Mastercard, and that sounds really Pollyannish, but sometimes it has people wrap around the other side and not trust you because it feels
too good to be true.
Like cloying.
Yeah.
And I've been given that feedback. But look, we're people, we're a team, we're looking to get a job done. So I would expect the executives at the company to model that behavior on the positive, not stand for the opposite of it when people are acting divisive. And I think maybe there's a little bit of kindergarten rules that we should remember up and down the organization and partnering with each other. Look, I think that, a team of marketers can do one thing, and there are some jobs that should only be a team of marketers. But I think in general, I'm a big believer, and I know this is perhaps passé to say, in the cross-functionalness and the diversity that comes with that, right? Diverse group of people are going to come up with, better creativity than people that all think a particular way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I know it's motherhood and apple pie. But I think it is for a reason.
But the truth's the truth for a reason. I feel like there are a lot of cliches that are sticking around because whether you like it or not, it gets to the bottom.
So look, there's a piece of that's got to come through your actions, and I'll just double click on this then. Yeah. So for my team, here's this in action. I had a team member once that said, don't tell them you're funny, tell them a joke, make them laugh.
Yeah,
right? Something like that. So here's me showing how that works. Each of my team members are embedded in either a business unit or a region. And I believe that there should be 5 buckets of objectives that they can hold up to the business that they do business with and the discipline, right? Because they got a foot in each.
Yep.
The first bucket is the business objectives of the area in which they are embedded. So let's say you're in business unit A. You take on the business objectives of that business unit. I don't care that you don't have direct impact on every little bit of that.
Right.
You're on that team, you're in that boat. They win, you win. They lose. How can you possibly win if they lose?
Precisely.
Bucket 2 tends to be the hardest, unless you're like in consumer packaged goods. That is, what are the marketing measures that ladder up to those business objectives? If we were in consumer packaged goods, I would say the top one is probably revenue and share. Excuse me. The second bucket would be traditionally trial, purchase, repeat purchase, loyalty. So what are the things that I'm going to impact for your business in that bucket? The third is then both bucket 1 and 2 would be outcomes. Bucket 3 would be output. What are you going to do in January, February, first quarter, first half, full year, right? So that there's some monitoring of, I can see as your manager that this calendar is going to help you hit these results, which is going to help contribute those results. 4 is then, wait a minute, you are a member of B2B and product marketing, multi-regionally, globally. What are you doing to drive the discipline? We've had no 2 quarters that have been the same. And so part of your job, part of my expectations for you are that you are helping the discipline become better and better and better. The fifth, perhaps, is a particular Mastercard element. Mastercard says to its employees, we want you to bring your whole self to work. And so I say to my team, well, then we need to leave room for each other to work on your whole self. And that can be, most people there would think of, oh, well, I need to log on to ana.net and take the next learning module.
Absolutely.
Right?
The check's in the mail.
But I mean, yes, and it might be you need to work on your mental health. It might mean you need to gain weight. It might mean you need to lose weight. Whatever becoming the best version of yourself is, that's bucket 5.
I mean, this is fantastic. And you did mention one conversation that you kind of left you with a few indelible lessons. And I feel like we'd be doing a disservice to our listeners if we didn't take it.
So this is the bookend of, I talked objectives, now let me talk feedback.
Yeah.
This was a moment in time where I received a real-time, in-the-moment feedback from my boss, Raja Manar. We have quarterly operating reviews in marketing where the team gets in front of Raja, and each of his directs brings their full team to Raja, and we go through the metrics, some of which I just gave you the construct for, and then we talk about, what we're going to do going forward, normal stuff. And Raja paused, and this was in the first half of my tenure working for Raja, which has been quite a number of years now. This was definitely pre-pandemic. And he says to me, Greg, he's like, I have this teacup. He's a big matcha drinker. So he's got this teacup. Might have been a corksicle, not sure, for the plug. And he says, Greg, this is a great cup, great mug. I travel with it everywhere. He's like, it might be a little bit better if there were some cork on the bottom so it would rest a little more gently. He goes, further, it might be a little bit better if maybe there was some friction tape on the side so it didn't slip in my hands, right? He goes, if I were to make these small adjustments over and over again, eventually I will have reinvented this cup. He goes, this is the Japanese principle of Kaizen.
Wow.
And I'm like, where are we going with this? Right? I'm like, yes, Toyota uses Kaizen, right?
Right.
And so he's like, Greg, you are great at this. Every quarter you come in here and you're a little bit better and you're a little bit better and you're a little bit better. And eventually this discipline of B2B and product marketing will have reinvented itself. He's like, don't stop doing that. He goes, but what I need from you is more step function change. And I was like, okay, interesting. I actually went and looked up the word. It's called the opposite of Kaizen, or the complement of Kaizen is called Kaikaku. Now, I'm sure he knew that and just didn't want to say the word Kaikaku in front of everyone for whatever reason.
Right.
And since then, we have striven, is that a word?
Yeah, I think so.
We'll look it up.
Yes.
We'll look it up. We have challenged ourselves.
There we go.
To have a portfolio on my team of Kaizen projects and Kaikaku projects. And so we're going into planning now, and we will have, let's say, 10 Kaizen projects and 10 Kaikaku projects. Guess what? 8 of these 10 should hit. I'm sorry for the listeners. 8 of the 10 Kaizen projects should hit, and at least 2 of the 10 Kaikaku projects hit. So overall, I've got a 500 batting average. But with the 2 Kaikaku hitting, you make sure that you've made some real transformational moves.
Yeah, absolutely. I really love that because people hear transformation. They're like, okay, that's a thing. It's like, no, that's a many different, what are we talking about?
Very deliberate. I guess the 10 together become transformation, right?
Yeah, yes. But it's really just like even a mindset. I think that's kind of even evolving the way you approach things when you have to think about like, what does
I think he was pretty clearly telling me you're not a big enough thinker. And so thankfully such things are learned.
Yeah.
And so now I've got my own healthy fear of failure where I'm like, what big ideas am I missing? Am I pushing the boundaries hard enough?
Well, I love that. You're going through your own restructuring while things are good.
While things are good.
Great
connection. That's a great connection, Mike.
So before I leave you out into this good day, we touched on AI before, but now we're seeing, the last few years, we're hearing Gen AI and these new developments. It reminds me of when digital started to become everything, and we started naming chief digital officers, and we got the digital team, and then eventually it just became air. Like, it's just marketing now. So I know Mastercard has had AI in its four walls for decades now. But with this new wave of developments, what is your philosophy to the long-term approach to integration?
Yeah.
How does Mastercard as a brand, at least through your vision, how does the future proofing happen?
So look, it's again about creativity. I mentioned earlier thinking about AI as an actor, as a team member. That would be one way. Look at your processes that you employ at your company, or as we do at Mastercard, and we ask, where can AI play a role here? But I think on a very much more close-in basis, let's talk about the individual sitting in front of a keyboard. I think there's exploration that has to occur. Now, many people probably have explored. Raja has really lit a fire under us, brought in AI experts to make sure that he's really, in a positive way, beating us about the head to make sure that we are investigating and exploring. For me, that moment of sitting in front of the keyboard is quite similar to standing in front of a card catalog in a library before, well, whether it's a digital card catalog or the old school physical ones. That research if anyone's done research papers, it requires a level of creativity. What if I look this way? What if I look at it that way? What if I look at a book about this and, read it a bit? Will I come at the content this way versus that way? I don't know. Maybe I'm. If there are any other history majors
No, I'm 100%.
here, you know what I'm talking about.
I'm
There's
with
that
you.
creative element. So there's that real creative element of getting in front of whether it's Copilot or Gemini or one of the chat GPTs and asking the creative questions. For me, I've been playing a lot with the deep research, right? And it's really a little bit hard to train yourself. How do you ask it these deep research questions that get it to be like, hey, Greg, I'm going to do this, then I'm going to do this, then I'm going to do this. But when it does it, it's amazing.
Yes.
It's amazing.
Yeah. And I absolutely love that. I haven't really heard a lot of you have to think creatively as you approach and use AI. I think so much, airwaves have been thinking to what can AI do creatively? What can you creatively make AI
I like
do?
that. I wouldn't have phrased it like that. I wouldn't have thought to phrase it like that. But yes.
But I love it.
Again, creativity is the last competitive advantage.
Oh, I don't know if we could end it on a better note than that. Yes, these are expensive, please. No, Greg, this has been such a pleasure.
Great. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you so much for being a guest on Scope.
Really appreciate it. We're shaking hands for those